My morning started like any other. I woke up in my small apartment in Lagos, stretched and reached for my phone to check the time before getting ready for work. But the moment I unlocked the screen, a bank notification made my heart stop. $8,000 charged to your credit card. I sat up so fast I almost dropped the phone. $8,000? That couldn't be right. I barely used that card except for emergencies. My hands were shaking as I immediately called the bank. "Hello, I think there's been fraud on my account," I told the representative. I explained that I hadn't made any large purchases and certainly not one that big. The woman on the line typed for a moment before calmly reading the transaction details. The payment was made this morning at the Royal Orchid Event Hall. My stomach dropped. The Royal Orchid Event Hall wasn't just any venue. It was the luxury hall my parents had been excitedly talking about for weeks. They wanted to book it for my younger sister Zara Okoye's engagement party. I remembered my mother showing me pictures of the chandeliers and marble floors during a family video call. I hung up with the bank and immediately dialed my mother. "Mom, did you use my credit card for something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Instead of sounding worried, she sounded cheerful. "Oh yes. Zara's venue is beautiful. You should see it, Amina. It's perfect for her engagement." For a second I couldn't even speak. "Mom, that was $8,000, I said slowly. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she replied casually. "It's your sister's big day. Of course you would help the family." That was the moment I realized something that made my chest feel tight. They hadn't asked me. They had simply taken my credit card and paid for it like my money belonged to them. I didn't even finish my coffee that morning. After the call with my mother, I quickly got dressed, grabbed my car keys and drove straight to my parents' house in Ikeja. My heart was pounding the entire drive. Part of me kept hoping there was some misunderstanding. Maybe they had used the wrong card by accident. Maybe they planned to pay me back. But deep down I already knew the truth. When I walked into the house, the living room was full. My mother Ngozi was sitting on the couch looking through pictures of decorations on her phone. My sister Zara was there too, dressed in an expensive designer outfit, laughing while showing my aunt something on Instagram. It looked like they were planning a celebration. No one looked worried. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, trying to stay calm. My mother looked up casually. "Oh, Amina, you're here. Perfect timing. We were just talking about Zara's engagement party." I stared at her in disbelief. Why was $8,000 charged to my credit card? The room went quiet for a moment, but not in the way I expected. No one looked shocked. No one looked guilty. My father, Chinedu Okui, slowly folded his newspaper and looked at me like I was overreacting. "Amina," he said calmly, "we assumed you wouldn't mind helping the family." I felt my chest tighten. "Helping the family? You didn't even ask me." Zara rolled her eyes slightly and leaned back on the couch. "Oh, come on, Amina," she said with a small, smug smile. "It's just a small contribution. It's my engagement party." "A small contribution?" I repeated. "Zara, that's $8,000. She shrugged like it was nothing. "That venue is perfect," she said. "And besides, you're the successful one. You can afford it." That was the moment my patience snapped. "No," I said firmly. "I didn't agree to this. I'm not paying for it." The entire mood in the room changed instantly. My mother's face hardened. My father sighed loudly like I was causing trouble. Even my aunt shook her head. "Why are you acting like this?" my mother said sharply. "This is your sister's big moment." My father added, "You should be happy for her not making things difficult." Then Zara suddenly stood up dramatically. "Wow," she said, crossing her arms. "So you're really going to ruin my engagement over money?" "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "You used my card without permission." But they weren't listening anymore. "You've always been jealous of Zara," my mother said coldly. The words hit me like a slap. I stood there in the middle of the room looking at the people who were supposed to be my family. And for the first time I realized something painful. They never planned to ask me. In their minds, my money already belonged to them. That night I drove home in complete silence. The streets of Lagos were busy like always. Cars honking, street vendors calling out, music playing from small shops. But inside my car, everything felt strangely quiet. My mind kept replaying the conversation at my parents' house again and again. The way they looked at me like I was the problem. By the time I stopped at a red light, something painful started rising in my chest. Memories. Memories I had pushed aside for years. Growing up in Abuja, everyone knew Zara was the favorite. She was the princess of the family. My parents adored her and they never even tried to hide it. When we were kids, Zara always got the newest clothes, the latest phone, and expensive birthday parties. Meanwhile, I was told to be responsible and set a good example. When it was time for high school, my parents proudly sent Zara to an expensive international school. The fees were huge, but they somehow found the money. I remember asking once if I could go too. My father laughed and said, "Amina, you are strong. You can succeed anywhere." So I stayed in a regular school. Later, when I got into university, I worked 2 part-time jobs just to survive. I worked evenings at a small restaurant and spent weekends tutoring younger students. While I was doing that, Zara was posting pictures from vacations and shopping trips with friends. And when she turned 21, my parents surprised her with a brand new car. I still remember standing there in the driveway, clapping with everyone else while she screamed with excitement. No one noticed I had taken the bus to work that same morning. But even after all that, I never stopped helping my family. When my father had a medical emergency a few years ago, I paid the hospital bills without hesitation. When the roof of my parents' house started leaking during the rainy season, I paid for the repairs. And when Zara decided she wanted to start a fashion business, guess who helped fund it? Me. That business failed within a year and Zara never even thanked me. Yet somehow I kept believing things would change. I kept telling myself that family is family. But now, sitting in my car that night, one painful truth finally became clear. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a bank account. And the moment they used my credit card without even asking, it forced me to question every sacrifice I had ever made for them. The week after that argument was one of the strangest weeks of my life. I expected my parents to call and apologize. At the very least, I thought they would try to talk things out. But instead of apologies, the phone calls started coming from people I barely even knew. The first call came from my aunt, Ao Balagan. I hadn't spoken to her in months, so when I saw her name on my phone, I was surprised. But the moment I answered, I realized this wasn't a friendly call. "Amina, what is wrong with you?" she said immediately, her voice full of disappointment. "Do you know the embarrassment you are causing this family?" I was confused. "Embarrassment? What are you talking about? You refused to pay for your own sister's engagement venue," she snapped. "People are talking. This is shameful." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Somehow the story had been twisted. It was no longer about my credit card being used without permission. Now the story was that I was refusing to support my sister. Before I could even recover from that conversation, more calls started coming. Cousins, distant relatives, even family friends were suddenly calling to give their opinions. Some tried to sound calm. Others were straight up accusing me. Then one evening I received a call that truly shocked me. It was Zara's fiancé, Kwame Mensah. Kwame was a wealthy businessman from Accra, Ghana. I had only spoken to him a few times before and he always seemed polite. But this time his tone was very different. "Amina," he said firmly, "I think you need to reconsider what you're doing." "What exactly am I doing?" I asked. "You are embarrassing Zara and our families," he replied. "It's just a venue payment. Is it really worth creating this much drama?" I sat there holding the phone, stunned. So now even he believed I was the problem. As the days passed, things got even worse. I started noticing strange posts on social media. My relatives weren't mentioning my name directly, but the messages were obvious. Family should support each other. Jealousy can destroy relationships. Success means nothing if you forget where you came from. Every time I opened my phone, it felt like another indirect attack. But despite all the pressure, I refused to back down. Instead, I did something my family never expected. I called my credit card company again and officially opened a fraud investigation. I explained that the charge had been made without my permission. The representative told me they would begin reviewing the transaction immediately. And the moment I ended that call, I knew something important. This situation was no longer just a family argument. It had now become a legal matter, one that could expose exactly what my parents had done. A few days later, Zara's engagement party finally arrived. Despite all the tension and arguments, the celebration was still happening at the same expensive venue, the Royal Orchid Event Hall. Part of me didn't even want to go, but after thinking about it for a while, I decided to attend. I didn't want anyone saying I was bitter or trying to ruin the event. I just wanted to show up quietly, congratulate my sister, and leave. When I arrived at the venue that evening, the place looked even more luxurious than the pictures my mother had shown me. Huge crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, soft golden lights filled the room, and elegant decorations covered every table. Guests were dressed in beautiful outfits. Music played softly in the background, and waiters moved around carrying trays of drinks and food. It looked like a perfect celebration. Most of my relatives were already there, laughing and taking pictures. Some people noticed me when I walked in, and the conversations around me suddenly became quieter. A few people gave me awkward smiles while others simply avoided eye contact. I took a seat at one of the tables near the back of the hall. I didn't want attention. I just wanted the night to pass peacefully. After dinner was served, the speeches began. My father spoke first, thanking everyone for coming and praising Zara and her fiancé Kwame. Then Kwame gave a short speech about love and family. Everyone clapped and cheered. Finally, Zara walked up to the stage holding a microphone, smiling brightly in her beautiful engagement dress. At this special moment, she began, "I want to thank everyone who supported us." The guests nodded and listened, but then her smile changed slightly. "Unfortunately," she continued, "not everyone in my own family wanted to see me happy." My heart immediately dropped. She slowly turned her head and looked directly at me. "My sister Amina tried to sabotage this engagement over money." A loud murmur spread through the room. Dozens of people turned to look at me. I could feel their eyes on me, judging me, whispering. I felt my face grow hot, but I stayed silent. Zara kept talking dramatically. Instead of supporting me, she created problems and tried to embarrass our family. More whispers filled the hall. It felt like the entire room had turned against me. For a moment, it seemed like I was about to be completely humiliated in front of everyone. But just then something unexpected happened. One of the venue staff members quickly walked toward the stage. He looked nervous as he whispered something to Zara. Her smile disappeared instantly. A second later, the venue manager stepped forward, holding a microphone with a serious expression. "Excuse me," he said to the guests. "We need to address an urgent issue regarding the payment for this venue." And suddenly, the entire celebration began to shift in a way no one had expected. The room that had been full of music and laughter suddenly went completely quiet. The venue manager stood on the stage holding the microphone, looking serious as dozens of guests stared at him in confusion. "I'm very sorry to interrupt this celebration," he said politely, "but we have just received an urgent notice regarding the payment for this event." Zara stood frozen beside him, her smile gone. My parents were looking at each other nervously. The manager continued, "The payment that was made earlier for this venue has been frozen by the bank because of an active fraud investigation." For a moment no one reacted. It felt like the entire room needed a few seconds to understand what he had just said. Then the whisper started. "Fraud investigation? What does that mean? Was the payment fake?" The manager raised his hand slightly to calm the crowd. "Until the bank resolves the issue, the transaction cannot be processed. That means the venue has not officially been paid." Suddenly all eyes turned toward my parents and Zara. The manager spoke again, this time more firmly. "If the matter isn't settled tonight, we will require immediate payment to continue hosting this event." Zara's face turned pale. She looked toward my parents, clearly panicking. My mother quickly stepped forward. "There must be some mistake," she said nervously. "The payment was made already." "Yes," the manager replied calmly. "But the cardholder has reported the transaction as unauthorized." The room exploded with murmurs again. Unauthorized. People began connecting the dots. Slowly, heads started turning toward me where I was sitting quietly at the back of the hall. Zara suddenly grabbed the microphone again, clearly desperate. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly. "Amina is just trying to create drama. She's jealous and wants to ruin my engagement." My father quickly joined in. "Yes, she reported it out of anger," he told the manager. "This is just a family misunderstanding." But the manager shook his head slightly. "I'm sorry," he said, "but the bank has already confirmed that the cardholder reported the charge as unauthorized use. They are currently investigating the transaction." That sentence hit the room like thunder. Guests began whispering more loudly now. "Wait, so they used her card?" "Without asking? That's serious."
I could see Kwame standing near the stage, his expression slowly changing from confusion to concern. Zara looked completely shaken now. The confident smile she had earlier was gone. She looked at my parents, hoping they would fix the situation. But no one had an answer, because for the first time that night, the truth was starting to unfold in front of everyone. And it was clear that this wasn't just a small family disagreement anymore. It was a very public scandal. The hall was no longer filled with celebration. Instead, it was full of whispers, shocked faces, and uncomfortable silence. People who had been laughing and dancing just minutes earlier were now staring at the stage, trying to understand what was really happening. Kwame looked deeply confused. He slowly walked toward Zara, lowering his voice but still sounding serious. "Zara, what is going on?" he asked. Before she could answer, another man stepped forward. It was Kwame's father, Kofi Mensah. Everyone knew who he was. He was a respected businessman from Accra, and his presence alone made people straighten up. Kofi looked at my parents first, then at Zara. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Let me understand something," he said slowly. "You organized an engagement party in an expensive venue, but the payment was made using someone else's credit card?" No one answered. The silence was uncomfortable. Kofi crossed his arms. Why couldn't the Okoye family pay their own bill? The question hit the room hard. My father tried to speak. "This is just a misunderstanding. Amina is overreacting." But Kofi interrupted him. "A misunderstanding does not trigger a fraud investigation," he said firmly. Kwame was now looking directly at Zara. "Is this true?" he asked quietly. Zara looked nervous for the first time that night. She forced a small laugh. "It's not a big deal," she said quickly. "My sister is just being dramatic." But the tension in the room was getting heavier by the second. Then something unexpected happened. One of Zara's friends, who had been standing nearby, spoke up quietly. "Actually, this isn't the first time something like this has happened." The entire room turned toward her. Zara's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. The friend hesitated, but then continued. "Zara borrowed money from a few of us last year too. She said it was temporary." More whispers spread through the crowd. Kwame frowned. "Borrowed money?" Another voice joined in from the crowd. One of Zara's old classmates spoke carefully. "She also maxed out 2 credit cards when she started her fashion business." My parents looked shocked now. Clearly, they didn't know about that. But the truth was slowly coming out. Kofi looked at Zara again, his voice calm but serious. "How much debt do you actually have?" Zara didn't answer. Her silence said everything. The confident, glamorous image she had spent years building was beginning to fall apart right there in front of everyone. Guests started whispering again. "So, the venue wasn't the only bill? She's been using other people's money?" Kwame stepped back slightly, looking at Zara like he was seeing her for the first time. And in that moment, it became painfully clear. The perfect life Zara had been showing everyone wasn't real at all. A few days after the disastrous engagement party, things became even more serious. I had spent a lot of time thinking about what to do next. For years, I had always stayed quiet to keep peace in the family, but this time was different. My credit card had been used without my permission, and now the entire situation had turned into a public mess. So, I decided to do something my family never expected. I hired a lawyer. After reviewing everything, my lawyer told me the situation was very clear. Using someone's credit card without permission was not just a family disagreement. It could legally be considered financial fraud. A few days later, a formal legal notice was sent directly to my parents' house in Ikeja. The letter was simple and direct. It stated that the $8,000 charge made on my credit card must be repaid immediately. If the payment was not returned, the case would move forward legally as fraud. When my parents received the notice, they were completely shocked. They had never imagined I would actually take legal action. In their minds, I was still the same daughter who always helped and never argued. My mother called me that same evening, her voice shaking with anger and panic. "Amina, what is this lawyer letter?" she demanded. "Why are you threatening your own family?" "I'm not threatening anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm asking you to take responsibility." She tried to argue, saying I was destroying the family's reputation. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. Because the truth was simple, they had created this situation themselves. Something else started changing too. The same relatives who had been calling me earlier to criticize me suddenly began calling again, but this time with very different tones. My Aunt Ao, who had accused me of embarrassing the family, now sounded much softer. "Amina," she said awkwardly, "maybe we all misunderstood the situation." Even some cousins sent messages saying they hoped the family could solve things peacefully. But by now, the story from the engagement party had already spread through social circles. People were talking about it everywhere. And the biggest change was happening between Zara and Kwame. After everything he had seen that night, Kwame had started asking serious questions. He wanted to understand the truth about Zara's finances and the debts people were now talking about. For the first time since their engagement, he wasn't talking about wedding plans anymore. Instead, he was quietly asking himself a much bigger question. Was he really ready to marry someone whose entire life might be built on lies? Within just a few weeks, everything changed. The engagement that had once seemed so perfect fell apart completely. Kwame had spent time reviewing everything he had learned about Zara, her debts, the lies about money, and the way she had treated me. He realized that marrying someone who had built a false image of her life wasn't something he could trust or commit to. One morning, I received a text from him, short and to the point. "I'm sorry, Amina. The engagement is over." Just like that, the wedding was canceled. Zara was devastated, and the news spread quickly through their social circles. Family, friends, colleagues, and distant relatives all whispered and speculated about what had happened. Her carefully crafted image of the perfect fiancé crumbled in front of everyone, leaving her embarrassed and humiliated. Meanwhile, my parents were left to face the reality they had ignored for years. For so long, they had shown Zara constant favoritism, lavish gifts, leniency, and endless praise, while expecting me to sacrifice and provide for the family silently. Now, they saw the consequences of that behavior. Their favoritism hadn't created a happy family. It had pushed one daughter away and allowed the other to live irresponsibly, without consequences. I could see the regret in their faces whenever our paths crossed, though no apology could undo what had happened.
As for me, life continued, but in a better way. The chaos had given me clarity. I realized I didn't need anyone's approval or validation to live my life fully. At work, my focus and dedication didn't go unnoticed. Within weeks, I received a promotion at my firm, along with a transfer to Cape Town, South Africa. It was a fresh start. New city, new opportunities, and a chance to build my life free from family drama. Sitting in my new apartment in Cape Town for the first time, I felt a mix of relief and pride. I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. I hadn't let fear or family pressure control me, and now I was moving forward on my own terms. And as news of the engagement collapse reached further circles, I realized something even more satisfying. Karma had arrived quickly. The people who had tried to humiliate me and take advantage of my generosity were now facing the consequences of their own choices, while I was free to grow, succeed, and live life on my own terms. It was a bitter lesson for some, but for me it was the perfect reminder that integrity and patience always pay off. Months had passed since the engagement collapse, and life in Cape Town was slowly settling into a comfortable rhythm. I had my own apartment, a new routine, and a career that challenged me in ways Lagos never had. I was finally feeling the kind of independence I had always dreamed about, free from family drama and constant demands. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through my phone, a message popped up from my mother. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what she would say. Her words were simple but loaded with meaning. She was asking for forgiveness. Reading them, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a little pride. For the first time, my mother seemed to understand how serious everything had been. But I also knew something important. I couldn't go back to the way things were before. I had learned a hard lesson about boundaries, about standing up for myself, and about knowing my own worth. No apology would erase the years of favoritism, the times my efforts were taken for granted, or the moment my credit card was used without permission. And I didn't need to let past family expectations dictate my happiness anymore. That evening, I stepped out onto my balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, its waves glimmering under the fading sun. I took a deep breath, feeling the salty air fill my lungs, and allowed myself to reflect. This situation had changed my life in ways I hadn't imagined. It had forced me to speak up, to fight for what was mine, and to realize that respect is something that cannot be bought, borrowed, or stolen. It must be earned. I smiled quietly to myself, letting the sound of the waves soothe the tension I had carried for so long. The family that had once treated me like a bank account had finally learned the truth. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Life was mine to live, and I would live it with dignity, strength, and freedom.